How's it going tonight, everybody? Cody here for the Trainwreck Podcast, episode 17? I think we're at 17 now, either 17 or 18. Either way, we're approaching legal age. But it's just going to be a solo show tonight. Drew, he had some commitments with his friends and stuff like that. And, uh, you know, he was off yesterday and he was off today. I had to work both days today, actually, which kind of sucked because usually Tuesday is my off day, but it was the first of the month and duty calls at the store. So it was a it was definitely upsetting. Actually, a funny story behind that. So last Saturday, I got to work and I like looked at my schedule and it said not scheduled. I'm like, what the hell? I always work on Saturdays. And I'm like looking, it says not scheduled. I'm like, I get fired and they didn't tell me. Because if so, I mean, cool, I'll go home. But I'm like looking, and then it says I work on Tuesday and Wednesday, which are usually my days off. And I'm like, something's not right here. So I go to my boss and I'm like, hey, what's the deal here? Why am I scheduled? And she goes, oh, I changed that. Or she didn't change it. Like the lady that makes our schedules changed it. So I could work on the first of the month because that's when people get their food stamps. And then that's when we're crazy busy. So they're like, oh, that's why they changed your schedule since you're usually off that day. I'm like, well, it's cool that I have a weekend day off, but I wish I would have known about that ahead of time just so I could have like made plans or something, which I had plans that night, but all day, all I did was play Madden and I cooked a lot actually. I made these bomb ass breakfast burritos and then I made spaghetti for lunch. So I did a lot of cooking and played a lot of video games until Saturday night when I took my friends to the Paramore concert and I was basically playing Uber driver for them. Um, when dropped them off at the concert and then when chilled at my buddy's house for a few hours and then picked them up. So yeah, I could have went to the mall or some shit and had some stuff planned out. We could have made it like a all day hangout before dropping them off at the concert, but I guess that's what I get for not checking my schedule. But one quick note, real quick. I know I've picked up some new followers today. Thank you to the 2,700 people so far that have watched my WWE SummerSlam predictions. I am so freaking thrilled about that video, man. I made it last night at around 11:30, and I was having this internal battle with myself after I posted it. I'm like, should I post it now or should I schedule it to upload? And like, the only time I really ever schedule uploads is this podcast because me and Drew do it so late at night and I have to do a bunch of editing that I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna schedule it to upload. But if I make like a WWE video or if it's just like something quick in my car, I just automatically upload it. And the WWE one, I made it late at night, and I'm like, I should schedule this for like 11 tomorrow. But then I kept going back and forth because, WWE is huge internationally, especially in like India. And I'm like, well, hell, it's nighttime over here, so I don't think I'm gonna have a strong American viewership. But there's a chance the people in like India and stuff will watch it. And so I said, screw it, and I hit publish. And that ended up being a good idea because I went to bed at like midnight and it had no views. Because right after I published it, I went to bed. I woke up and it had like 256 views, and I was like, "See, that was the right idea." And I didn't think it was gonna get any higher than that. I'm like, 256, that's pretty good for a predictions video. I think the highest I ever had a prediction video go was like $400, and that was or 400 views, and that was for Elimination Chamber a few months ago. And that pay-per-view had insane hype because that was Roman Reigns versus Sami Zayn. So I'm like, I don't think it's gonna get any higher than this. Well, I go to work, and around noon, it kinda started to die down just a little bit. And I'm like, "Here, let me look at my phone real quick." And I saw that there was a comment on the video, so I went to look at it, and then I saw it had 1,000 views, and I was like, "Holy shit." I'm like, "That's really freaking good for my channel, usually if I have something hit 1,000 views, it's a short, and that's just YouTube throwing me a bone whenever my shorts pop off. So I'm thinking, 1,000, it ain't gonna get any higher than that. So I go to lunch around 2, and I started looking at it, and it was just growing like crazy. It was at 1,700 views, and 1,800 views, and 1,900 views, and then right when I got to back from lunch at around 3, I looked and it was at 2,000 views, and I was like, I guess I gotta stop saying that it's gonna stop getting viewed now because heck, people are watching it, and this is freaking awesome, And I was picking up a crap load of subscribers, which really made me feel good because I was having some doubts on myself just because I was stuck at 331 for like a month. And then last week's episode of the Trainwreck podcast, I finally gained a subscriber. I finally hit 332. And then I looked, I was at 336 after I published the SummerSlam video, then 338, and then I'm at 340 right now. And that was after a month of no growth. And then I gained 8 subscribers in a day. And yeah, I was just so freaking thrilled, dude. And when I got home from work at around 6, it was at 2,700 and it's kind of stayed there. And I mean, I don't care if it doesn't get another view, man. I'm just happy it did so successful. I like coming on here and talking about the NFL, and I like talking about WWE. I really want to do like sports broadcasting, and this is kind of like a sports broadcasting thing on a miniature scale. It's not like a grand production like ESPN or FS1 or something like that, but it's my little rinky dink production, and at least with this, I can pick the topics I want to talk about. But if there's any of my new followers that are checking out this podcast, thank you. Appreciate it. And the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight, it's kind of more of a deeper subject. When it's me and Drew, this podcast isn't serious. But I've been thinking about like goals and stuff. Maybe it had to do with this podcast I was listening to earlier. And I've never been like a goal person. I've just kind of been like, I just want I just want life to go on. I've never been like, oh, I want this job, or I want this, I'm just kind of like, cool if I get that stuff, but it don't matter to me, except for like an F-150. I really want an F-150. But like my like most important thing in life is just if I can get remembered as a good friend, a good husband, good dad, even though I don't have kids, I'm not married. But, if I get remembered as a good husband, a good dad, a good friend, that's all that matters to me as long as people are like, "Oh, he was cool as fuck," or even now, it makes me feel awesome when people are like, "Oh, you're a good guy," and stuff like that, and I try my hardest to be, and I mean, everybody has their slip ups of being an asshole, we all snap, and I know whenever I do, I feel like a fucking dick afterwards because I don't wanna have the worst part of me remembered. That's the one thing I didn't like whenever I was a manager is, you know, part of your job is to get on to people, and sometimes people take it personal, and then sometimes people can separate personal stuff from work. Heck, I'll even admit I'm kinda guilty where it's like, your boss gets onto you and you're thinking like, "Well, what is she thinking? Does she think I'm fucking stupid or something?" I think we're all kinda guilty of that, and that's one thing I didn't like was, like, if I had to get on to someone, I just wanted to make sure they didn't think it was a personal attack. But, that's my main goal in life is just be a good person. Now, I talked about the truck earlier, and actually I'll pull up kind of what I want. Well, especially I don't like the newer bodies of the F-150s, but I just remember when I was, like, 14 looking at, like, truck reviews and stuff on YouTube, and ever since then, I've been, like, dead set on getting a truck. Here, I'll pull it up on the image share for you guys. like, this body style of the F-150, I think it's just so freaking cool. It just looks nice, and the interior, that's what's really sold me on Ford, is that big navigation screen, like, my work van, which is wrecked right now, I'll get into that a little bit, um, it has one of those navigation screens, and that thing is a freaking life changer, plus it has Apple CarPlay, and, like, I drive a Ford right now, and the AC in it's pretty freaking awesome, which is nice because it's 109 outside. Not right now, but it was earlier today. So, I've just always liked Ford. I've never had a Chevy. I have had 2 Dodges, and those are the 2 worst cars I have ever had, and I will never buy another Dodge for as long as I live. I guess I can get into that actually. So, my very first car was a Dodge Neon, little tiny car, you know? They kinda look like the Herbie cars to me, like the front of them. But I had that car for, like, 2 months, and it stopped it would be selective on when it would start, you know, like, there was one time I was at the gas station, and this motherfucker would not start for, like, 4 hours. I was, like, stranded there. Thank God it was during, like, the fall season, so it wasn't, like, hot or cold out, but, yeah, it just wouldn't turn on. The steering on it was terrible. The brakes on it were horrible. I mean, that car and then I got in a wreck in it, and that car was just horrible, man, and that was my first car, and god, that car just it put my first driving experience as, like, a negative, you know, it made me freaking hate driving, and then a few years later, after I graduated high school, I got a Dodge Dakota because my grandparents' neighbors, they were moving to I don't know where the hell they moved to actually, but they were moving far away and they didn't wanna take the truck, so got it for them for, like, 1,500 bucks, and it's this camo truck, it's freaking badass looking. It says, like, Duck Commander and stuff like that on it, and you know, me and my mom, we were huge Duck Dynasty fans whenever that show first aired. So I was like, this truck is fucking awesome. But same thing with that happened with my car, happened with this truck. But this happened during the summertime. I was in downtown Tulsa and I went to the library, and the library there has a parking garage. So I park in the parking garage and go into the library, and I was just hanging out there, you know. I go to leave, and the truck won't start at all. Meanwhile, it had a pretty new battery in it. Wouldn't start at all. And I call my insurance to get it towed. Well, here's the thing about parking garages. Tow trucks don't fit in those. And we can't get the damn thing started to even like get it out of park, you know, to where you could like put it in neutral and like, yeah, it wouldn't shift at all. Plus, you'd have to push it downhill. And so it took my insurance 6 hours to find a tow truck that would fit into a parking garage so they could get my truck out of there. And then we took it to a body shop and they're like, "Oh, it just needs a new battery." Put a new battery in it, won't start. And I'm just like, ugh. And I don't know what ended up being wrong with it. It was probably the alternator. But got it fixed eventually, didn't have a vehicle for, like 2 weeks. Then, about a month later, I am driving in Coweta. I was going home, I lived in Broken Arrow at the time. I guess for people that don't live in Oklahoma, I'm speaking Spanish to you right now because 'cause I'm talking about these towns, and they're like, "Man, they got fucking funny ass names, I don't even know where the hell they are." But to me, I'm talking, like, to my friend. It feels like I'm talking to a friend right now, so that's why I kinda was, like, mentioning towns and stuff like that, even though, like, to a viewer right now, they're probably like, "What the hell is he even talking about?" But I'm driving home from Quita, and I'm on, like, this back road, and it's a back road that goes into the city, and I'm going like 45, which was the speed limit, and there's a red light coming up, and there's like 5 cars at this red light. I go to hit my brake, just straight air, and my truck's not stopping at all. And, like, you know how when I guess for people that drive, when you push on your brake, it kinda feels like there's resistance behind it? There was no resistance behind this thing, like, I seriously put my foot and it just went down, and I'm like, "What the hell?" And meanwhile, I'm going at parked cars at 45 miles an hour in a truck that's pretty much all metal, and I'm like, "Oh, shit, I gotta do something." Keep boom, 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 trying to hit the brakes. Nothing's working, and I look, and I have, like, this much room to make a sharp ass turn, and I'm like, I am either way, I'm either gonna fuck somebody's shit up or I'm gonna get out of this. And by the grace of God, I got out of it. I seriously jerked that steering wheel as hard as I could, and then I tried to put my truck in a ditch to get it to stop. And then I'm like, fuck, how the hell am I gonna get this thing home? And so I'm like, can I? No. And then I was kinda in the ditch, and I pushed on the gas, and I pulled the emergency brake, and it stopped. I'm like, "Okay, this is gonna be my way home, I guess," and I was like, I don't know, it was probably, like, 5 minutes from my house. So, I didn't have that many stops. So I'm like, "Okay, if I just take it slow, and then if I get near a stop car, just jerk this freaking emergency brake as hard as I can." And that's what I did, which is probably not the smart thing to do, 'cause it'll really fuck up your emergency brake doing that, but I was so done with this freaking vehicle at this point, and got it back, and I can't remember what they said, was it the harmonic balancer? I can't remember. It's something that only Dodges have that went out, and I'm like, "This is fucking bullshit. I am done with this truck. I am done with Dodge. I am never getting one of these for as long as I live." And a few months later, I got the car that I have now, and I've had my difficulties with that car, but it hasn't damn near got me killed or gave me a heart attack. Like, the worst thing I I can't even think of the worst thing that's happened with my car. Oh, the radiator blew. That was expensive. That was probably the worst thing that ever happened with my car, but at least the brakes never went out in it when I was going fast, you know? If that ever happens, I don't know if I'm gonna get lucky twice. Plus, this car is not gonna take a beating like that truck would. That's another reason, like, I wanna get a truck. It's just, like, if I got in a wreck, I would feel way safer getting in a wreck in a truck compared to, like, my tiny ass car, you know? Like, I don't know why, I just feel more secure if I'm in a truck if I got hit, which I haven't gotten in a wreck in like 6 years, so I'm probably due for one, so watch it, I'll finally get a truck and then I'll wreck it. That'd be not funny, but it'd be like a sick joke, like, "Oh, hey, guys, finally got my dream truck and it's gone." Yeah, like, maybe part of it is, I don't know if you guys know who Mr. Technical Difficult is, but he was my first, like, favorite YouTuber. And he's one of the dudes that I take a lot of inspiration from. But I remember he uploaded this video whenever he got a brand new truck, and he was showing it off and all that, and his review of that truck was just fucking cool, and then he was showing the inside of it, and I'm like, "Man, this truck's pretty freaking nice," and I'm like, "I want something like this," and that probably helped influence my decision on wanting an F-150. So this is it right here. Hopefully this isn't gonna get me in trouble, but I mean, hell, this is from 11 years ago. This is, how long I've been watching this dude, but it was like this candy red truck you see, and I'm like, "Man, that color's cool," and it doesn't have the nav screen, but, like, the Ford interior is just freaking cool, and that's what's kind of, like, influenced my decision, but, yeah, Mr. Technical Difficult, man, he was one of my he was the first favorite YouTuber I ever got into. Part of that is just because he used to do these little kid on Xbox Live videos where he would go into lobbies with a little kid voice changer and start talking shit to people, and the videos were fucking hilarious, and, um the ones I started watching was right after GTA 5 came out. He was doing those videos of GTA 5 talking shit on Xbox Live, and those videos were amazing, and that's what kinda got me into him, and then he had a gaming channel that was called White Lightning Kyle, and he would do, like, story times on there and tell, like, high school stories and stuff like that, and I was 13, 14, so I was, like, getting ready to go into high school, and I'm like, "Oh, this is what I'm gonna experience," and stuff like that, like, I wanna have stories like this, and, yeah, like, he just for a teenage boy like me with his sense of humor and then having he's a great storyteller, he, that's who got me into watching YouTube videos, and then that also led into me discovering my love for podcasts because he was on a podcast called PTFO Live, and then they stopped doing the show for a few years, and then they came back and eventually transitioned into the Dude Comedy Podcast, and they have, like, 200 episodes of that. They don't do that show anymore, but they were one of the first podcasts I ever listened to where I was like, "Oh, cool. This is, like, entertaining as fuck," you know? So, yeah, one of the main reasons I do YouTube now is because of him, but another reason I do YouTube and this guy's pretty controversial, he's very much into politics now, which I don't disagree or agree with him on the political side, I just think it's killing his channel, but Smokey Dog that's what he goes by now. It used to be Mr. Smokey Dog 7, but his channel now is Smokey Dog, and he did these funny news clips and stuff like that, and, I mean, a lot of his most popular videos had to do with sex, but he would just report on these crazy news stories where, like, this one guy, like, stole a bread truck and was going around handing people bread and stuff like that, and then there'd be, bestiality stuff that he would report on and just random ass, funny ass news stories. You know how you hear about a Florida man? He would have a video pretty much every day about a Florida dude. And he was like the first dude where I'm like, this dude, I could do what he does. Meanwhile, I'm not nearly as animated, and I'm not gonna touch on politics, but I'm like, "Dude, this dude's doing, like, three-minute videos, and they're funny as fuck. If I can just make a three-minute entertaining video, I can do that." And then he did his own podcast, but he did his solo, and it wasn't until I started doing, like, live streams watching WWE where I'm like, "Dude, this is actually, like, kinda hard," Like, you have an audience and you're trying to keep them entertained and stuff like that, and meanwhile, I'm sitting there watching TV, and I'm like, "How do I how do I do this?" And, like, "How do I keep myself entertained?" So I started watching his podcast more and more. His podcast, not his live shows are kinda stupid. But his podcast, that's where I'm like, "Okay, I gotta have stuff where I can talk by myself for an hour like I'm doing right now." So, shout out Smokey Dog. But those were the 2 dudes that I, like, watched the most throughout my teenage years, and then eventually I became obsessed with Fightful, which is a wrestling website. I was there, like, day 1 of Fightful. I think the first video I ever watched of them was a Vince Russo, Sean Ross Sapp draft, and that only happened because I used to be a fan of Joe Cronin, and I'm not anymore because I've grew out of that humor to kinda realize he was never funny to begin with. But he had Vince Russo on one of his shows, and then I got that Fightful draft recommended, and they had, like, maybe, like, 30 subscribers at that point. But I'm like, "This Sean dude's pretty cool." I thought Vince Russo was kind of annoying, and now I nowadays, I think he's a fucking idiot. But I wasn't smart to the wrestling business back then. But I'm like, "This Shawn dude's pretty cool," and they're the first channel that I've ever been there from, like, the beginning to where they are now, where they're about to hit 100K subscribers, and, like, one of my dreams on YouTube is to hopefully do some work with Fightful. And I guess that kinda ties back to maybe I do have goals in life, like, I never think of myself as, like, a goal-oriented person, but I'm like, if my channel ever, like, gets to the point where I could, like, email Sean and be like, "Hey, dude, I wanna do a predictions video," or, "Hey, let's do a podcast together," like, I would love to do a podcast with Sean talking about, like, fantasy football and stuff like that, or talk like, if the Bengals and Cowboys play each other again and, like well, they will play each other again in, like, 3 or 4 years, but if they, like, met in the Super Bowl or something, oh, I would love to be on a podcast and go back and forth talking shit with them, but that probably won't happen, but I guess that is, like, kinda like a YouTube goal of mine. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, I guess it is kinda like it's not a goal because I don't have anything to do with it, but I just wanna see the Cowboys win 1 Super Bowl before I die. Like, I am so tired of every season ending in disappointment, and I guess that's just kind of every football fan. There's only one team that can win the Super Bowl every year. So, all 31 other fan bases are disappointed unless you're like a team that sucks like Washington or somebody where it's like, "Hey, we sucked less this year, I didn't expect us to win the Super Bowl." Then I guess you're not entirely disappointed, but, like, if you're a team that makes the playoffs, you got Super Bowl hopes because on any given Sunday, anybody can win, All it just takes is getting hot at the right time, and you can make a run to the Super Bowl. But it seems now whenever Dallas makes the playoffs, that's when they fall flat, like, they'll go in with a lot of crazy ass momentum, like, a few weeks before the playoffs 2 years ago, they scored, like, 56 on Washington. Like, they had insane momentum and then lost in the first round to the 49ers. And I don't know if Mike McCarthy calling plays is gonna be the solution, but something's gotta give, man. This is the weakest the NFC has been in a while, like, the 3 threats really in the NFC are Philadelphia, Dallas, and the 49ers, and I touched on this last week on the Trainwreck podcast with Drew. If I'm the Cowboys, I'm building a team trying to beat those 2 motherfuckers. But, like, Dak Prescott, man, I just think he's the fucking man. I love that dude, like, whenever we first drafted him, I didn't really know much about him. Then I started watching his Michigan State highlights, I'm like, "This dude's pretty freaking good." And then he started the opening preseason game of 2016 against the LA Rams. It was, I think, their first game back in LA, and he was fucking phenomenal in that game. And whenever Tony Romo got hurt in that preseason game against Seattle, I was actually not scared because I'm like, I think this Dak Prescott dude's pretty freaking good. And he ended up proving me right. He was like, I mean, I was right about football stuff before, but this was like one of those times when people are like, I don't know about that. And then I freaking nailed it, nail on the head. I'm like, fuck yeah, I got that one right. This dude's a freaking stud. And I mean, Dak, he's just off the field, he's just an awesome dude, and he's overcome a lot of adversity, his mom dying of cancer and his brother committing suicide, and then, on the field, he had that traumatic injury in 2020 where his fucking bone was sticking out of his foot. I just love Dak Prescott, and I want him to win a Super Bowl because he's just a dude that deserves it. If Jason Witten never got to win a Super Bowl, I at least want Dak Prescott to, because God, it breaks my heart that Jason Witten never won one. That's another dude who's just fucking awesome. Horrible commentator, fantastic football player, and a fantastic dude. And see, I guess on like a list of people I'd love to meet, Jason Witten would be on there. not even just to talk about football, but just talk about, like, our backgrounds and stuff like that, and talk about life, I just feel like he'd be a positive influence on anyone's life. Another person, this is another Cowboys related person I would love to meet is Jerry Jones, because he's the one that's made the Cowboys the most valuable franchise in sports. And for that, I just wanna share a beer with him and tell him thank you for everything he's done for the Cowboys. Don't really agree with a lot of his decisions, but he's kind of taken a back seat the last couple years. It's more been Steven and Will McClay making moves, and then Jerry steps in when he needs to. And I think that's a pretty good thing right now. Hopefully, it leads to some success. And yeah, I want Jerry to win another Super Bowl before he dies. He's 81, I think. I mean, time's ticking, no one gets to live forever, and I know the dude has won 3 Super Bowls, but they were fucking 30 years ago. I feel like he deserves another one before he kicks the bucket. Another dude I wanna meet really freaking bad. I'm just going off on tangents, I'm sorry, guys, but I wanted to get a podcast out. I didn't wanna slow our momentum, plus with me having a very successful YouTube day, it made me excited to make another video. But Masashi Kishimoto. You can see this is Naruto volume 45. It's the beginning of the Pain arc. Like, I think the very last page actually is whenever he hits the almighty push. So Naruto versus Pain hasn't even started in this book yet. But I know Masashi Kishimoto doesn't speak any English, but I just want to bow before that dude, tell him thank you for the show that seriously has shaped my life. And, I'll bow to him, I'll shake his hand, I'll freaking give him a hand job if he wants. He's a dude that's he's had an impact on a million people's lives, and he doesn't even really know it yet, and a talented freaking drawer, and like I said, I know a lot of people hate on Boruto, I'm not one of those people, but it's gonna be a sad day when Naruto fully wraps up. And this is probably my controversial one right now, because a lot of people hate this guy right now, but Jason Aldean, he's been my favorite artist since I was 5 years old when I first heard Amarillo Sky. Amarillo Sky is still one of my favorite songs, and the dude, I think, is arguably the best at breakup songs. Last last year I had a big breakup, and, Grown Woman, that song, oh my god, that reflected what I was going through. Same with The Truth, which is in my top, like, 5 favorite songs ever. I mean, there's a million Jason Aldean songs I can list off, and I've thought about doing a video for my channel, actually doing, like, a top 10 Jason Aldean songs, but I feel like now is the time because so many people are looking at Jason Aldean news, but it's also not the time because I don't want people thinking that I'm supporting his message. And it's probably the only time we ever talk politics on the Trainwreck podcast, because me and Drew never talk about it. Uh, I don't give a fuck about politics. I think they're all fucking assholes. I Any politician, I just automatically think they're an asshole. I've never seen like a good politician. I think the US government system's kind of flawed. I think a lot of it's outdated. I don't even think there should be a president. I think there should be like 5 presidents. Because think about when we first became a country, there was 13 states. There's fucking 50 of them now. They had 13 states for one motherfucker. Now we got 50 of them. You think one man can do 50 fucking states? No. But like I really think America should be kind of like divided like east, west, middle, other, you know, and we should have like 4 or 5 presidents. And oh my god, this is going on too much of a tangent, but the political parties, I fucking hate political parties. I'll say it, and if I offend anybody, fuck it, unsubscribe. Both sides are wrong. Both sides are just giant fucking babies that can't compromise on anything. and that's all I'm gonna say. But going back to Jason Aldean, yeah, he's the best at love songs, and he's the best at fucking breakup songs. I'm not really too much into, like, his party songs, like, they're alright, some of them have, like they're good, and some are alright, but his new song, "Try That in a Small Town," I actually don't even really like the song, really I don't really care about the political stuff behind it, I just don't like the song that much. But I'm super thrilled that right now he is number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 just because as a dude that's been a fan of his for almost 20 years now, it just makes me happy to see him have this shitload of success. Yeah, this right here, I went on the Billboard website, it hasn't been refreshed yet, this is a courtesy of his wife's Instagram page, but Jason Aldean earns his first number 1 hit on the Hot 100 would Try That in a Small Town, just, like, as a person that's been a longtime fan of his, it's cool to see, and also just as a fan of country music, number 2 is Morgan Wallen with Last Night, which, I mean, that song's a fucking banger, and probably my favorite song in a long time, Fast Car, Luke Combs, that's number 3, and I was always a fan of the original Fast Car by Tracy Chapman, and then when I first heard Luke Combs's version, I was like, Jesus. He already took a song I loved and made me love it even more. And so as someone who's a fan of country music, it's very cool to see it doing so well right now. And I never thought in my lifetime that I would see a country song hit number 1 on the Hot 100, and now we've had 2 this year with Morgan Wallen and Jason Aldean, because I don't think Luke Combs has hit number 1 yet, but he might eventually. But, yeah, just with how dominant pop music is, like, I'm surprised these 3 dudes are beating Taylor Swift right now. Maybe maybe people kinda are on my boat and think that Karma song sucks, but what's that other song she has? It's Me, Hi, Anti-Hero. I'm surprised that's still not number 1, honestly, so to think of how these dudes are beating Taylor Swift right now is really fucking shocking to me. But WWE SummerSlam is this weekend. I gave my predictions video. Thank you to everyone that watched it. Um, where does WWE go from after here? You think a lot of these feuds are going to end. Ronda and Shayna is definitely going to end. But what's next for Roman Reigns? Does he face Jimmy Uso? Does something happen with Solo Sikoa? Or is he gonna be off TV for the next 3 months like, it's kinda looking like that's what the dirt sheets are reporting on? And Cody Rhodes, I mentioned it in my video, I really don't want him to feud with Bray Wyatt because I feel like it's gonna create some negative momentum for him, and then say he ends up facing Roman Reigns again at WrestleMania, then people aren't gonna be really, like, invested because they're like, "God, that feud with Bray Wyatt sucked. I don't give a fuck about Cody Rhodes anymore. Fuck him." So, hopefully they got bigger and better plans for Cody. Speaking of Roman Reigns, him and Paul Heyman, they were on First Take this morning. Him and Paul Heyman and Stephen A. Smith had one of the greatest interactions I've ever seen on Twitter earlier, where Stephen A. was talking about taking Paul Heyman's job and stuff like that. This video was fucking hilarious. And then Paul Heyman and Marcus Spears, they were on the air arguing, and you would have thought they were like working with each other, just with how good this back and forth was. It was funny as fuck. This video right here, I don't think any audio is gonna play, and hopefully it doesn't get copyrighted, but Stephen A. was telling Paul Heyman how he was jealous of Heyman's ability to piss people off, and he wishes he could be just like him. He starts crying on Heyman's shoulder, and Heyman's just like, "I know, it sucks, you'll never be me." Dude, me and my grandpa, we had a good kick out of that. But dude, I don't know how long I've been doing this podcast. but I feel like I'm kinda running out of stuff to talk about, and it was just all kind of one big ramble, but it's a solo show, and that's kinda what those turn into. Here, I'll take a look real quick, see if ESPN has any news. I mean, all the news they have right now is baseball related, and dude, I don't know shit about baseball. And, all the NFL news is, training camp stuff, and I ain't touching on any more politics for tonight, so that is the podcast, Trainwreck Podcast, episode 17, 18, something like that. Thank anyone that's made it this far, I appreciate it. Um, we're growing on Spotify. I never advertise Spotify, which is my fault. I just kind of stick straightly to YouTube just because YouTube's my baby. But we do upload this podcast on Spotify. I know my boy Trevor listens to us on there. Um, we actually got a review from the Valley Boys podcast, but I'll be honest, never heard of it before. Looked it up. This podcast was fucking funny. Um, And then the comedian that hosts it, Dave, I looked him up. Dude had like 500,000 followers on freaking Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called now. And he like listened to an episode of our podcast. I'm like, dude, this dude's like actually like fucking famous and he's listening to us. So, Dave, if you made it to the end of this episode, thank you for leaving a review. I appreciate you, man. And I listened to a few episodes of your podcast and it was freaking funny. Oh, I was gonna touch on this. Yeah, my work van, it's, wrecked right now, so I'm not gonna be able to listen to as many podcasts because 'cause I'm gonna be working in the store, and they don't allow headphones because they suck. So, I'm behind on a lot of podcasts, and I only have 1 off day this week, so hopefully I can catch up on those tomorrow. Laughing on the Sidelines, that's another podcast that's, like, my dream to go on there and talk sports with them, but I know they'll probably have an episode here drop in an hour, and I will listen to that whenever it comes. I'll do a top 5 list of my favorite podcasts, but man, that's a tough one to judge, actually, especially if I'm doing, like, an all-time one. That would be really freaking hard now that I think about it. But once my channel gets bigger and that like, a top 5 list to me takes a lot of effort because you gotta put thoughts into your opinions, and you gotta grab screen grabs and stuff like that. Those take, like, some effort, and I don't wanna do them and then no one watch them. I wanna wait till my channel gets bigger and then really push out, like, the stuff I really wanna do. I eventually wanna get a capture card, man. They're $200. I do wanna do some gaming content on here, but that's the other thing, there isn't any games I really wanna play, like, I'm kinda burnt out on 2K. Madden can suck my dick. WWE 2K23 is pretty fun, but it's also glitchy as hell, and I suck at Warzone. But eventually, I'll get to some gaming videos eventually. That's this podcast. Thank you to anyone that's made it this far. Like and subscribe. Thank you to everyone for the growth. I appreciate you. And I hope everyone has a good night. We'll probably see you next week. I don't know what Drew's work schedule is. I'll text him and see what day we can set up for recording. I'm recording this on Wednesday morning now because it's after midnight, but this will probably be up either today or tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Follow the podcast on Spotify and subscribe to the YouTube. Thank you.